This week on Young Leaders Radio, I sit down with Nathaniel Bozarth, the co-writer, co-producer, and voice of Dividing Lines, a history of segregation in Kansas City. It was created a part of the Johnson County Library's Race Project KC. The project takes you on a turn-by-turn driving tour through the history of segregation in the Kansas City metro. Nathaniel has recently been working to figure out how white people can focus on themselves and work towards racial justice. We'll be talking about his Dividing Lines project, systemic racism, and what projects he is currently working on. 2018, you released a project called Dividing Lines, a history of segregation in Kansas City. What was this project for, and what did you find in your research and filming of this project?
Yeah, so Dividing Lines it's like Google Maps meets a podcast. And you actually hear my voice for this hour and a half, 2 hour long drive that you take through Kansas City. And it was produced in conjunction with the Johnson County Library, their Race Project KC. And the goal was to try to help people sort of see their surroundings in a new way, and see their surroundings through the lens of the past, so that we can begin to understand that the way things are racial divisions aren't there by accident, they aren't there by chance, but they were actually there by intent and by discriminatory policies, racist policies on the local, municipal, state and national level, both public and private. I think one of the biggest things that we really tried to get through on that tour was that we wanted people to understand that the complicity of everyone in these policies, that it's not just, so we talk a lot about J.C. Nichols. J.C. Nichols is a well-known Kansas City figure. Just recently, his name was taken off of the fountain at Emmanuel Cleaver 2 Boulevard and Mill Creek Parkway, which also used to be J.C. Nichols Parkway. So his name was recently taken off, which was awesome. But we talk about him a lot on the tour. But what we tried to do was to say that, look, like J.C. Nichols kind of developed these practices. He perfected the racially restrictive housing covenant. He did that in Kansas City, then exported that all over the country, in fact. But we wanted to show that it wasn't just him. If it weren't for the actions of other people, the people buying his properties, other real estate brokers who were effectively creating the supply through blockbusting for his properties, if it wasn't for those actions of other people, the practices that he pushed forward wouldn't have happened. And furthermore, I think it's really important to note that what J.C. Nichols did, like, he was absolutely a racist person, but he was also doing what was best practice, or was good business, and that's something that we wanted to try to communicate through the tour, because today, if we don't watch ourselves by just doing the best practices, we can perpetuate inequality and perpetuate racist ideas and policies. You asked about the research process?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm just like going.
No,
Sorry.
I love it. Yeah, great.
So Race Project KC has been around for a while, and they really get a lot of credit for the project. I mean, one is the funder for the project, but also for doing the initial legwork. So Race Project KC, I think, had been around for 3 years or so, and there were about 6 or 7 high schools which once a year would get on a bus and then drive around Kansas City with they had a group of librarians and teachers had done this research, and they had a 7-page packet of just facts about different Kansas City landmarks that they would just kind of read off of, standing at the front of the bus, talking to these students. And they really tried to make it a discussion with the students, like asking the students to observe what they noticed was different when they were in Mission Hills versus when they were in the Ivanhoe neighborhood east of Troost. So the dividing lines was meant to sort of expand the impact of Race Project KC and that Race Project KC bus tour. The idea was to make it more accessible to a broader range of people, both students and other adults. So like I said, the research was kind of started. So really what I did along with Christopher Cook, my co-writer and co-producer, was to try to weave it into a story. Because it's the same length as like a feature film. So our idea was, well, like, let's make this cinematic and have a story arc. So we went and we interviewed people for the tour. We interviewed Bill Timaeus, former Kansas City Star reporter and author. We interviewed Sidney Willens, who actually passed away right after the tour, who's a civil rights advocate and lawyer. We interviewed Mamie Hughes. We interviewed a couple of students. We interviewed Margaret May, former director of the Ivanhoe Neighborhood Community Center. So really it was a personal history that we tried to it was a personal narrative through the perspective of these people that we then kind of corroborated through some text-based research as well.
Wow, that's actually very fascinating. And so did it take only a year to do, or how long did you guys work on this project?
I think it was about 8 months from project start to completion. It was probably almost a year. It was a lot of work. We worked really hard. It was like, still to this day, it's the only project I've worked on that I actually cried during the production process, because like my co-producer and I were just so invested in it that when we had to make concessions or even when we just had creative differences, we were so passionate about the content that we got mad and sad at each other. Like, it was intense.
Yeah, wow.
There was no blood, but there was definitely sweat and tears.
Do you think it plays into what we are currently seeing happen in Kansas City and other parts of the country? Do you think what we did in the past has now affected how we are in the future?
Absolutely. So, when you look at housing discrimination, you're looking at one in an array of really economic factors that contribute to the racial wealth gap. Today, the average white household has 10 times the net worth of the average Black household. So I think it's of course there are outliers. Like, of course there are really wealthy, rich Black people. Look at locally, Patrick Mahomes just signed his $450+ million 10-year contract.
Huge deal.
Very excited about that. But so of course there are outliers, but when you look at the average, there's an extremely significant difference between the average wealth of white families versus Black families. And housing segregation contributed to that. Coming back from World War II, white families, white GIs could take advantage of the GI Bill. The armed forces had been integrated at that time. White families could move to Prairie Village, purchase a home for about $6,000 at the time, get a federally backed mortgage through the GI Bill and the FHA, and now those homes are worth $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. So that is if you bought a home in that time as a white person, you gained an amazing amount of wealth over time through the process of appreciation and equity. Less than 1% of Black GIs were able to take advantage of the GI Bill, not for lack of trying, but through like explicitly racist practices. A Black person could not move into Prairie Village at that time because of the effects of racially restrictive covenants, which, even though they had been, or a few years later, after World War II, they were outlawed by 1948. But even then, there continued to be there continued to be intimidation practices and other things which dissuaded many Black people from that opportunity. And that's just one thing. Like, there's also employment discrimination. There's disparities in health treatment and outcomes. There are all sorts of disparities which contribute to that racial wealth gap. That racial wealth gap then kind of creates like a vicious cycle that now man, I totally lost my train of thought because you were connecting it to the present, current protests, policing patterns. Here, I'll make the connection. Policing patterns. So when there's definitely a connection between poverty and crime, right?
Right.
That connection has no regards for race, but our policies have much regard for race. Poor white people commit crimes at the same rates as poor Black people. The difference is that poor white people are not necessarily corralled into the same part of the city as poor Black people. Starting with Richard Nixon through the war on drugs, and then continuing with presidential candidates who would use their law and order dog whistle campaigns, we began over-policing the urban core, which tended to be Black communities because of these residential segregation practices. So you have more police in a part of the city that does not necessarily have more crime than other parts of the city. So you pile all that in together and you get disproportionate usage of force, you get disproportionate numbers of Black people being killed by the police and white people. Excuse me. And it all rolls in together. It's all connected. I don't know if that was very clear. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. Well, and one thing I do want to ask you is, can you explain the idea of redlining and how that takes an effect into this whole process? Because I think you've kind of already hit on it a little bit, but to kind of put that fact in there so people know the word redlining.
Totally. So redlining. So go backwards to the beginning of the 20th century, when with the creation of the Homeowners Loan Corporation and the National Association of Real Estate Boards, there was a move to get federal backing for home loans, home mortgages, to make it more affordable for the everyday man or woman to own a home. The federal government commissioned a report to rate neighborhoods based on their credit worthiness, so that the FHA and other organizations could then make quick and fast decisions on who should be lended, who should be insured for a mortgage or not. These maps were coded. I'm actually going to probably get the colors wrong. I think it's blue, green, yellow, and I can't remember all the colors. There were 3 different colors on the maps. We'll say green was an all-white neighborhood. In a neighborhood that was yellow, we'll say, was an integrated neighborhood, and it was called in transition. And then an all-Black or majority Black neighborhood was labeled red and was thus redlined. You could not get a federally insured mortgage in a redline neighborhood. That's another thing. It's illegal today to do that, but unfortunately, it set a precedent which echoes to the present. It's still more difficult to get approved for a mortgage on east of Truth in Kansas City. It's the terms of your mortgage are probably not going to be as friendly as the other side or the west side of Truth in Kansas City. And it's I think the really awful thing is now it's not because there is racist language in policies or in underwriting practices, but it's because practices pile on top of each other and pile on top of the historic residential patterns. They pile on top of the fact that east of truce, there are going to be more homes that are dilapidated because the owners of those homes either didn't have access to loans and capital to upkeep their homes because of redlining practices in the past, or because there was heavy turnover due to the racist practice of block busting, which really exploited Black people in Kansas City and cities all over the country. It just keeps piling up. Like, it's like I feel like my brain just starts to explode because I try to explain it, and it's like, but then there's this thing and this thing, and they all go together. And like, the more you like think about it and read about it and learn about it, it's awful. It's so awful.
Well, and it's people like J.C. Nichols that took advantage of that program to then develop what he developed.
Totally. Yeah.
So we'll kind of move into systematic racism now. Can you explain systematic racism, and what do you believe are the huge issues that we face within that now in our current day?
Yeah. Well, so what we just said was it. Like, just the fact that it's so many interlocking systems that create systematic or structural racism. Structural is actually the term that I like, because my background is in anthropology, and there's this idea of culture called the barrel model that's also used in sociology. So picture a barrel. I'm looking for like a cylindrical object. Okay, I got, oh, you're not gonna be able to see it. I have a virtual background on, so I can't, if I hold up an object, it'll disappear.
I just almost told you that there's circular objects behind you, but that is not. Yeah. So.
So I could use my face. That'd be silly. So the idea with the barrel model is like, or it's also called a layer cake sometimes, is that there's this barrel sitting on a surface, and the surface is like the earth. That's the environment. Then that barrel is then 3 layers stacked on top of each other. The lowest stack is the infrastructure. Then just above that is the social structure, and then just above that is the superstructure. When a social problem or an issue spans all 3 of those stacks, the infrastructure, social structure, and superstructure, it is said to be a structural issue or a structural problem. And that's what we have with racism today. It's baked into our landscape, our infrastructure, by merit of our dividing lines in the city, of our residential housing patterns, our business patterns. So there's a physical aspect of it that you can see. Then it's embedded in our social structure by merit of our social relationships. As a white male, it is extremely easy for me to go every day of my life only interacting with white people. It's really easy for me to live my life. It takes intentionality for me to not have a social environment that's like that. So therefore, racism is baked into our social structure. And I would add, like, it's also based into how we treat one another. It's baked into how we think about other people. It's baked into how what my gut level reaction might be if I'm walking down the street and I see a Black man walking towards me versus a white man walking towards me. That little subtle unconscious bias that needs to be made conscious. That's another way it's baked into the social structure. But then it's also baked into the superstructure. That's like our ideologies and our beliefs. That one's the hardest to talk about, because especially as a white person, it's something that I have to work to make to make it seen what is sort of unseen. And that goes to the beliefs that I have about people that look behind me. So I actually probably don't do a very good job of differentiating between that and the social structure, because I think I was really getting at that unconscious bias, which is probably more part of the superstructure. But the point being that it is endemic to American culture, racism. It's a part of our founding. It's a part of so many decisions we make throughout every single day, subconsciously especially. that's what makes it systemic or structural. It's everywhere. And kind of as I alluded to a little bit earlier, the it's nowadays, you don't have to say black, you don't have to say race for a policy to have a lot to do with race. And I think that's some of the most dangerous things, because it's become so much more difficult to find and eradicate those types of policies, which then perpetuate this cycle.
You know, one thing that I hear a lot of young people say is that systematic racism isn't real, or it's not as severe as people say it is, but it's more of just a social economic issue. How would you respond to someone that, if they were to say that to you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's both. I would say, I mean, because we can just go back. So I'll take that in two parts. So one, to say it's not severe, I'll go back to, maybe this is, I'm just going to like talk through this. To say it's not severe, that systemic racism is not severe, feels entirely false because of that racial wealth gap statistic I talked about earlier. 10 times more wealth in a white family than a black family. That's a huge difference. That's the difference, that it changes your credit score, that changes your ability to buy a home or not. Like, it's a huge difference. Now, that is a socioeconomic difference, but it cannot be reduced to simply a rich and poor, wealthy and not wealthy scenario, because Black people are disproportionately poorer than white people because of the policies of the past, not because of lack of trying, not because of lack of intelligence, not because of lack of anything, except for racist policies fueled or rationalized by racist ideas. Um, I mean, and really, like, to say that is to try to wipe your hands of complicity. To say that, oh, it's just a socioeconomic issue, is a really easy way to then say, like, oh, well, you know, I if it's just a socioeconomic issue, I don't have any complicity in this racist or in this not racist system, so therefore, like, I'm good. But really, like, we're all complicit. Black, white, Asian, Middle Eastern, we're all complicit in it, because we're all breathing in this water. Yeah. Did that? I
So,
don't know.
no, yeah, it's great. Where do you go from there, though? So, like, as an individual, like, what can we do to kind of fix the system, or to at least make things better?
Yeah. So there's an inner work and there's an outer work. There's an inner work, and I've kind of alluded to this as well, that, like, for me as a white male, I have a ton of blind spots. I truly believe, and I will readily proclaim, like, my starting point is as a racist. Like, I grow up, regardless of my parents or my surroundings, like, my sort of native ideas are going to be racist, because, again, that's the water that we're swimming in. So it takes intentional effort for me to eradicate those ideas that live inside of me. And I really believe, like, it's going to take me the rest of my life. Like, I can't ever stop learning or stop being vigilant to eradicate those ideas. When I eradicate those ideas, it helps me to, as I become aware of them, it helps me to stop those ideas in their tracks. When I stop those ideas, hopefully it means that I am more compassionate and loving to my brothers and sisters with color. I stop doing microaggressions towards them, which again pile up onto each other and create a different world for people of color than for me, a white person.
Can you explain what a microaggression is?
Yeah, I mean, can I explain what a microaggression is? I mean, microaggressions are like, little subtle sort of coded language that a person might use um, that is going to be hurtful or harmful to a person of color.
Okay.
And there's microaggressions. I guess it's not just microaggressions don't exist only with regards to race, but they can also be with regards to sexism or homophobia or any sort of ism that's out there. Do I need to come up with an example?
Yeah, if you don't mind, that'd be great.
I think of a microaggression. Oh, okay. Well, Tony, this is uh, the. Can I do something like mean? Can I? It's a little bit mean.
Sure, go right ahead.
It's kind of calling you out a little bit.
Okay, cool.
So you caught yourself. You totally caught yourself. I really believe like referring to the
I know
protest.
exactly what you're going to at me
Yeah.
for. And I caught myself. I really did, but I
Okay.
knew, and I didn't mean to. It just kind of just came right out. And I was actually hoping you would bring this up. So
Oh,
I'm really
cool. There
glad
you
you
go.
are.
So I mean, well, and really the fact that you just said like you didn't mean to. That's I believe you. I believe that you didn't mean to, and it's okay that you didn't mean to, and it's good that you caught yourself. Um, those are all true. Like just because I commit a microaggression, it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean that I'm a racist person in the way that is used as a like a nasty pejorative, like you're a racist. It's not like it. Like we all do microaggressions, and it's just a constant work to try to identify when we do them accidentally or purposefully, and then just get better each day. Like I think like there's something to trying to normalize the fact that like we're all stumbling around like doing our best, and we can all always do better. Like I absolutely, as someone who like I mean for 8 years like it's been a really like large portion of my life to be an anti-racist, and like 8 years later like I absolutely still say microaggressions and things, and I try to own that because I want especially white people to step into that space of like knowing that like hey, we're all messing up, like it's okay, but we got to move forward. Yeah, so that's microaggression. I wanted to say so that's like the inner part of anti-racism, of how do we move forward. There's also an outer part. That outer part can be things like going to a protest. It can be things like using your right to vote, like and letting anti-racism inform how you vote. It can be, participating in local politics, and it can be thinking through your like workplace policies, and how those policies might actually be might perpetuate racial disparities. So that's the inner work really has to do with what's going on inside of you and then interpersonal relationships. The outer work has to do with advocacy and changing policies, because policies, I just finished reading Ibram Kendi's book, Stamped from the Beginning, and he's a sociologist and historian, and he talks about how the history of the United States is one of racist policies actually creating racist ideas, and not the other way around. Which I think it's for me, it was a really novel way to look at how racism is perpetuated. That we have sort of the status quo, we have these policies in place which have racially disparate impacts, and then we over time we have continually evolved and adapted racist ideas to then sort of justify the racist system that's in place. So it's important to do the work of attacking our own bias and getting it out, and it's also important to kind of get it at the root, which is actually the policy.
Absolutely. Thank you. So recently you've been working to figure out how white people can focus on themselves and not pay as much attention and kind of put themselves into, I'm just going to let you take this. What have you been passionate about lately and what have you been working on?
Yeah. I mean, it's so many different things. I think I've been really, I think throughout my career, I'm most passionate as a white person to talk to white people about this issue. And uh, and I think there's lots of reasons for that. One, like, this is a white people problem. Like, white people created the policies that perpetuate racism. So it's our problem to fix. Like, we can't. It is totally victim blaming. It is totally totally immoral to say that, like, oh well, black people got to fix this. Black people got to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Like, that just can't be the solution. It's not right. So I think I've always been really passionate about, like, focusing on white people, and really recently I've been focusing on, like, how what is this internal work of anti-racism, and what's this what is the most strategic way to move the needle? What's the most strategic way? I know I read a lot more and spend a lot more time thinking about this because it's a part of my career. And I don't expect every white person to read as many books as I do or to spend as much time thinking about it. But I do hope that every white person does something. So I've really been thinking about, like, what is that strategic minimum that we need to push and expect every white person to do. And again, knowing that not every white person will do even the strategic minimum, but I'm not, I know that it's not going to get the job done. It's not going to lead to equity and justice for all, to expect every white person to read Stamped from the Beginning. Like, not everyone's going to read that book. Mm-hmm. So then there's, like, a bunch of projects I'm working on. So Dividing Lines is exciting. Is going to, we don't really have a timeline, but eventually we're going to make it virtual, so that you'll be able to experience Dividing Lines, the tour that we talked about at the beginning of this episode, at home, either, like, on your computer or from, like, VR goggles.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we're really excited about that. Again, don't know exactly when that'll get completed, but that's in the works. With Race Project KC and the Johnson County Library. Also with Race Project KC and the Johnson County Library, we're working on a classroom game to sort of simulate the mechanics of residential segregation. We're very excited about that. It'll be designed for high schoolers. We got to pilot it in pre-COVID times, and we're really pleased with what seemed to be like its didactic impact. We are working on that again. It's weird and difficult to work on that now, just with all the uncertainty about what's happening this fall. So lots of cool and exciting projects happening.
And what do you hope to get out of this? What do you hope that, like, the next couple of years look for you? What do you hope to see in our community in the next couple of years?
Man, I mean, the goal is, that's a great question. I probably should think more about that question. I think maybe that's why I've been thinking about that strategic question, that minimum strategic goal, because I think I'm someone who's just very curious and interested in history, and have always seen that as being a part of convincing white people that this matters. But then with this discussion of policies, there's not necessarily a direct line between convincing people that this matters, understanding the past, and making policy change. So maybe in the next couple of years, like, trying to bridge that gap between educational resources, which I've been in the process of making for the past 8 years, and then figuring out how to bridge that from actual policy change. Actually, so I am doing that now that I remind myself. I have been doing a lot of research and study about reparations recently. There's been a really awesome groundswell um, of information about current policies that have been put forward for reparations for the descendants of enslaved Africans. And I am working on a video project to sort of try to keep that conversation going in hopes that it'll happen.
That's great. So I always enjoy ending these interviews with this question, and it is: do you have any advice for young leaders on how they can get involved, what they can do to kind of start making change in their community that they really don't have a starting point? So where can they start, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think start by listening. That can be listening to others in your circle. It can be by reading books, which is in a way a type of listening, or go find the people. Whatever your change is, find people who are making that change, and then listen to them. Listen to them about what changes. That didn't make any sense. What am I trying to say? Sorry. Do you want to know? Do you want me to answer that question like specifically for anti-racism or like in general?
Just in general. I mean, if you want to do both, that'd be great too. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of up to you. I kind of liked where you're going with the follow people
I mean,
that.
so something I've been
Yeah.
thinking about is that like if I want to positively, I guess I'm feeling really torn. Like I have a direction that I keep beginning to speak into, and then I feel torn. So just like jump into this complexity with me. The it the reason that I focus on white people. Let me just start go that direction. Like one of the reasons that I focus on white people is that I know like I have something to say, and I have a message for white people. Racism is not a new topic for Black people or people of color. I have very little new to say to Black people of color. Now, I mean, like I do have Black and people of color in my influence that do learn things from my resources, and that's great. I want to benefit them, but I want to teach primarily white people. White people are my target audience. I mean, if you want to make an impact, it's a sensible it's a sensible and a compassionate thing to go talk to the people you want to impact. I think specifically in anti-racist work, you have to be really respectful about how you do that, because you don't want to encourage tokenism or force people of color to always be the voice or force a Black person to be the voice of all Black people. So that's where I think like I was like, well, should I say that? I don't know if I should say that. Like, yeah, I do want to say that. I think it's a valid thing to do. Like if you want to go, if you want to, like, if you were going to create programming for a certain community, it would be silly to not ask the community, hey, what do you need? Like it would be a manifestation of some sort of paternalistic saviorism to just decide what they needed and do it for them. And that's what I was trying to get at. There's a little bit of complexity there. That's why reading books is great, because if you read a book by like a Black person, that Black person has already decided that they want to speak. So you're not forcing them into an uncomfortable situation just for your own benefit. Did any of that make any sense?
Yeah, no, it was great. And I really do appreciate you coming on and hanging out with me for a little bit. And it was really good seeing you again too. So
yeah,
it's been a while.
Super rambly.
No, you're good. That was great.
I've been on the podcast in a while, and I've just been like thinking so much about this that I feel like I'm just holding a lot of thoughts, especially right now. Yeah.
Well, and you're definitely somebody that I look at as kind of not, and I think you'll go against me when I say expert on the topic, because I think Would you call yourself an expert on this
I
topic?
actually would claim that a little bit, or like, I
Good.
don't know,
No,
like
because that's where I would put you. Because when I thought of systematic racism in Kansas City and redlining and that kind of work here in the city, you were the first person that I thought of, and that's because of your project that you worked on, dividing lines. So I really appreciate it.
I'm a public historian. That's a good word for me. I have of course enormous amounts of respect for academics who have the credentials, have the receipts to prove their scholarship. I don't have that, but I do have 8 years of doing this work and spending a lot of time thinking about it. So it's something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something. Can I like plug something?
Absolutely.
Okay, so something I've started doing recently, for a couple different reasons, but I've started trying to do like I don't know, it's not, is this even a thing? Like, is this a thing? Like, is there a name for this? Like, I've been trying to spend 60 seconds every day doing a video of myself talking about some issue in racism and justice work.
And you've been doing it on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen it. So that's great.
Facebook and Instagram. So if people are interested in tuning into that, I'm committed. I'm going to do that 60 seconds every day for however long.
Do you want to throw your handle in here? What's your handle for Instagram?
Yeah. So on Instagram, it's BO_Nathaniel. And Nathaniel is NATHANIEL.
All right, perfect.
I said that, now I have to like check like that. Yeah, that is what it is.
Well, wonderful. And I hope people check it out too, because I've been watching them on Facebook, and you really have enlightened me on a lot of topics as well. So
cool. That's great. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Tony.
I would like to thank Nathaniel once again for spending some time with me today. If you would like to hear more from Nathaniel, go follow him on Instagram at BO_Nathaniel, NATHANIEL. If you are not already, please follow Young Leaders Radio wherever you get your podcasts. Also, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Young Leaders Radio. Tune in next week for another episode of Young Leaders Radio.